Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to my channel. My name is Joanna. If this is your first time visiting the channel, thank you so much for being here. My intention is very simple. It's to help you remember who you are underneath the layers of your distortion or underneath the layers of your ego identity. And why would that be important? Because when you remember who you are effectively returning to your power. And I haven't heard a person yet say to me, Joanna, help me feel more disempowered. Everyone wants to feel more empowered. Why is it important to feel? What's the benefit of being more empowered? Well, let's look at it this way. Would you rather have more power or less power? Would you rather feel more empowered or less empowered? Feeling less empowered limits your choices. Feeling more empowered allows you the ability to perceive that you have more choices. And the moment you can perceive something is the moment you can do something about it. If you cannot perceive that there is a choice, you will not be able to make a choice. So feeling empowered and being more in your power allows you to create more choices for yourself. And again, choices for many people equals freedom. I have not met a person yet who said to me, Joanna, help me feel less free. Everyone wants to feel free. Most people are free in this world. Not everyone, but most people are free. However, many people don't feel free. And that's because many people live in their own inner prisons. So if you would like to not escape your prison, but if you would like to recognize your own prison, see the prison for what it is, an illusion, then you can effectively do something about it. Or to say it differently, you can then choose to release yourself from your own prison. And prisons, as we know, are very confining, and to live in a confined space means that your ability to experience more out of life is not there. And everyone that I have met, including myself, wishes to experience more out of life. Not more pain, but more pleasure, more joy, more abundance. So we could say it differently. To feel more empowered allows you to experience more pleasure, more abundance, more freedom. It has many, many, many benefits. So if you are into that sort of thing, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel, to share this channel with someone who you feel might benefit from it. And click the notification button. It will tell you when I upload new transmissions. So thank you so much for being here. And I do hope you find something valuable in this transmission. For those of you who are returning, thank you so much for coming back. I always say, without you, I wouldn't do what I do. And what is it that I do? Well, I channel source through me, which is today's very important topic. It's one that's very dear to me. First and foremost, everyone can channel source. In fact, everyone does channel source frequency. Why? Because source is something that lives within you. It's not outside of you. It's not some authority over you. Source lives within you. So we channel source each and every day. The kind of channeling that I'm talking about is channeling source with the least amount of distortions. In other words, yes, everyone can channel source, and everyone does, but not everyone channels source clearly. So today's topic is about yes, you can channel source. You don't have to be a special person. You don't need permission to channel source. The one thing that I would suggest, though, and that has been the biggest Achilles heel for me with regards to channeling source is my own distortion of worthiness of channeling source. So when I first realized that I was able to channel source, my entire structure in terms of my inadequacy and my unworthiness came to my face. And I had a very difficult time at first integrating the very idea of how can I, Joanna, channel source? And when I ask that question, what I get back is the reason I'm asking the question in the first place is because I'm filtering it through my smallness. So it's not a question of whether you can channel source. It's a question of, do you feel worthy of channeling source? Because if you don't feel worthy of channeling source, you will not allow yourself to channel source. But here's the thing. You are channeling source each and every day. The very source field that animates you flows through you each and every day. It is, do you channel source with clarity, through your clarity, or do you channel source through distortions? And today's topic is going to be a lot about what does it mean to channel source without distortions. It doesn't mean you don't have distortions, because we all do, but it does mean to be aware of your distortions, because the moment you become aware of your distortions, you are no longer channeling source as clearly as possible. So it's not about getting rid of your distortions. It's about not letting your distorted lenses be the source of your channel, if I can use that analogy. So first and foremost, I'm repeating myself. Anyone can channel source. You don't have to be special. You don't have to ask for permission. You don't have to be worthy. You already are. Everyone can channel source, including you. Source is always available. Source is not selective or exclusive to very few. If there is anyone that says, I am the only one who has been chosen to channel source, my advice would be run in the other direction, because that is coming from ego. Okay? Nothing wrong with ego. In fact, ego is very important, because it doesn't matter how clearly we channel source, we still have to channel it through our ego. There's nothing wrong with ego. But when we channel through our distortions, we don't get the clearest message possible. So in order to channel the clearest message possible, is you have to know your distortions. So the universe, the source, doesn't select, and it's not exclusive to one person or few individuals. The other thing I want to say that's really important is the reason why this topic is so important to me is because if everyone can channel source, and yes, everyone can and everyone does, it eliminates the idea of putting certain people on pedestals. And that's because the human thinking can often be that, oh, if this person is channeling source, then they must be somehow special. Not any more special than you are. They just are able to channel for whatever reason, because that's part of their life path. They've cleared a lot of distortions. But the point I'm trying to make, just because someone channels source does not make them special. It also does not make them the authority. It doesn't give them the authority, but people have a tendency to put people who channel on pedestals. And I used to do that for a very long time, because I believed I was not worthy of channeling source or angels or whatever it is. until I had to do some substantial amount of work on my own distortions in order to be at peace with the fact that I too channel source. In fact, it's everyone is inherently equipped with the ability to channel source. So, can you channel source? Absolutely yes. Do you believe that you can channel source? Ask yourself the question. Do you believe you can channel source? If the answer is yes, perfect. If the answer is no, that's your distortion right there. So in order to channel source clearly, you have to look at that distortion. So today we're going to talk about what it is like to channel without distortion or as little distortion as possible, how to recognize distortions, and we'll talk about shadow work because shadow work is a huge part of what I do in this lifetime. And basically the benefit of working with shadow or distortions is to reclaim your power back. What does that mean, Joanna, to reclaim my power back from my distortions? Where if you identify with your distortion, then distortion has power over you. Then you identify as your distortion, it becomes part of your identity. And the moment you identify with your distortion, you will filter everything through these distorted lenses. But distortion is a part of you. Distortion is not you. And the moment you realize that you have a distortion and that you have been identifying with the distortion, the moment you can see your distortion is the moment where you can effectively free yourself from identifying with that distortion. So for example, my distortion was, and still is to some degree, the idea of unworthiness. It's a very, very, very deep layer. Basically, it's an existential layer that says to me that I am not worthy of existing. It's a very deep, deep shadow. Many people, I would probably say most, have some level of unworthiness. And it's because it's so deeply seated in the human consciousness, in the humanity's fabric. But that aside, the moment I identified my distortion, the moment I became clear of that distortion, is the moment where I stopped identifying with that distortion. So even though there is a part of me that believes that it's not worthy, I am no longer controlled by this distortion. I have created this distance between my awareness and my distortion, and that is what allows me to be a more clear channel. Am I 100% clear? No, because I'm still a human. Again, if someone who channels or says that they're 100% clear, that's a distortion. And I have them too. Here's the difference. Someone who does a lot of shadow integration is someone who begins to channel source with the least amount of distortions or in the least amount of through distorted lenses. Hopefully that makes sense what I just said. So again, it's not about getting rid of your distortions. It's about recognizing a distortion when there is one and learning to disidentify from that distortion so that, yes, you may have a distortion, but it is not you. Your distortion is never you. So, what is channeling source? Channeling source is essentially allowing truth, love, and clarity to move through you unfiltered. Even right now, I am very much aware of my distortion. It's on my left. That's how I function. And then distortion questions if I can believe what I receive, because I've spent most of my entire life second guessing myself. And I'm very aware of this distortion right now, trying to control and manage what's coming through me right now. However, the difference is because I can clearly feel it, I can clearly see it, I can manage it better. So again, it's not about getting rid of your distortions. It's about your clarity around your distortions and being mindful and being honest and being aware of when you are channeling through your distortion or when you are channeling more through your heart. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. So the question isn't, can you channel source? The question is, how clearly do you perceive source and how clearly it moves through you? So let's talk about the role of distortions. What are distortions? I made some notes here so that I don't forget the important things I wanted to talk about. So what is the role of distortion? Distortions are filters, biases, and unprocessed wounds. The more we hold on to our distortions, the more we hold on to our pain, the more we hold on to our unprocessed wounds, the more we identify with those. And those obscure clarity. This is not a judgment. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's somehow wrong. It simply is. And so we can do something about it, or we can just keep on, moving through life through our distortions. But remember, distortions limit our freedom because distortions are limiting in nature. Also, distortions are frequently fear-based. Fear is tied to control. So the distortion, the ego will try to control everything. Again, there is nothing wrong with control. But when we over-identify with the need to control, then we're going to try to control everything that flows through, okay? Which, if that's what we do, we are not clear channels of source. Here's how, here's an analogy. Imagine light going through a stained glass. And the messages take on the colors and shape of that glass, of that lens. So anything that you channel will be filtered through your distortions, which there is nothing inherently wrong with that, but it is not the purest form of truth. And there's a gazillion different truths. I don't claim to channel the highest truth. I don't claim because I don't know. What I can say is that through working with my distortions, I can fairly confidently say that for the most part, I can get myself to a space where I see my distortion, but I also feel the channel coming through me. And the moment I am aware of that and I feel the distortion coming through or trying to take control, I take a deep breath. I have to relax. And I have to let go of the control. Control is always tied to safety. So the reason why my ego wants to control what's flowing through, it's because it feels on some level that what I channel may be perceived in the wrong way, and there is a very old, painful wound of persecution for me. So I have done this work in many lifetimes, and I have been prosecuted for it, and it ended badly for me. So I have a tendency to want to filter things so that I will be perceived in a way that's not going to come back to me in a negative or in a mean way. But I am conscious of that. Because I'm conscious of it, I can manage it better. So although there is a part of me that wants to control what's coming through, I am very much aware of what's to flow through me and the part of me that wants to control. And I do my best to keep that part of me on the side in an observer's position while source flows through me. Okay? Now, the one thing I want to say, and I want to be very emphatic about it, I do not want you to take what I say as gospel. I never, ever, ever want you to hear from me what I say is the absolute truth, because that's not true. That would be my ego. I don't know. All I know is the highest form of truth from my experience that I have been able to experience, maybe there's another I haven't experienced yet, is that we are all part of consciousness. We are all part of one consciousness. And we are all expression of this consciousness. And its highest expression is pure love. It is not the kind of romantic love that we humans are used to. It is the kind of love that's present and unconditional. That is for me the highest form of truth, and I have been able to experience it. It doesn't demand anything. It doesn't force anything. It doesn't try to control anything. It simply is all-inclusive. And it's a beautiful space to be in. It's thank you. It's not performative. In other words, the highest truth doesn't care how we perceive it. But it's even more than that, because to say that the higher truth doesn't care would mean that this truth or this consciousness has some kind of an agenda. It doesn't. Consciousness has no agenda. Consciousness simply is. I don't know how to describe it any other way. This is what's flowing through me. So different people can receive different messages from same source due to filters. So I'm sure you have too, gone through many psychics in my life, and they all have given me different perspectives. And many times their perspectives were being filtered through their own ego and their own distortions. And when I was younger, I wasn't able to see it. When I was older and I gained more experience, I was able to see it right away. This is why, for the most part, I don't seek out external answers. I ask absolutely. I'm open to ideas. I'm open to interpretations. I'm open to other points of view. But I no longer put authority in someone else's channeling. I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen to what someone else channels. All I'm saying is that whatever the person's channels, doesn't matter how amazing they are channeling, they are still filtering through their own distortions. And that's okay. And that's okay. The difference is, if we are aware of our distortions, we can keep our distortions at bay and not let these distortions filter the source that we are channeling. I hope that makes sense. So I also want to talk about how source comes through. So for me, it's a very palatable flow. I can feel it. I can feel it right now. It flows through me on my right side. It enters through the top of my head and it moves down my spinal column and it goes out through the heart, which is through the love center. My ego, on the other hand, is on my left, and it's it's sharp, it's static, and it wants to control, but it's just kind of stuck. So for me, channeling source, thank you. For me, channeling source feels like freedom. That's what it feels like. It feels expanded. It feels calm. It feels peaceful. It feels absolutely non-judgmental. There is zero judgment. It feels both powerful and gentle at the same time. There is a certain sense of purity with it that I can't quite describe, but the image I'm being given, it's like gentle, fluffy clouds, something very soft, something just very, very soft. So that is how I perceive source. I also perceive through images. You'll hear me sometimes saying thank you because I will have word or phrases that come through to me. For me, it happens on the right side. And there's a certain flow with it that's very unobstructed. On the other hand, my ego is very rigid. It wants to grab onto the message and it wants to do its own thing and it wants to manipulate it and present it to you in a certain way because my ego has an agenda. There's nothing wrong with it. It just does. So I'm very much in the present moment as I'm speaking to you right now. I can very clearly sense the difference of the flow of source through me and my limited ego with its own agenda. And because I can feel it and because I can see it, I can very clearly see when my ego starts to seep through and wants to color what comes through. So I have to take a deep breath, find my center, and I have to tell myself that I'm not doing anything wrong because in the past, doing this work was vilified, was punished, I was executed for it. So there is this part of my ego that still remembers this. I have a cellular memory that doesn't want to perish because of what I channel through. But I'm being told very clearly and emphatically that in this lifetime, I'm not going to die for it. I may be prosecuted through comments once in a while, but, comments are also filtered through people's distortions. So I'm learning how to be okay with the fact that what I channel may trigger some people. I don't channel to prove anything to you. In fact, I don't want to prove a damn thing. All I wish for is for you to remember who you are underneath your distortions and beyond the identification of your ego. So for me, it comes in various different ways. Images, sensations, knowing. Sometimes my channeling comes not even through speech. When I'm working with clients or with my class, and when I'm doing an initiation, for example, like I did a few days ago, and clearing, I will make a whole bunch of sounds and noises that are coming out of my mouth that are not scripted by my ego, but are just flow, and my body wants to express it in a certain way. And it's not through dialogue, but it's through sounds. And it's interesting because it has an effect on people's energy. They can actually feel things moving in their bodies. But again, that's an expression of source coming through me. So that's just showing you that source can express itself in various different ways. Thank you. See what I just got? I just got an image to talk about. Some people channel source through music. Some people channel source through writing. Some people channel source through painting. Some people channel source by taking care of pets. It comes in various different ways. But I think what we're talking about here is channeling source with the intention of perceiving higher perspectives and higher consciousness, not only in terms of information, but also in terms of frequency. So when you channel source, you also channel frequency, higher frequency. And when that frequency is unfiltered through the distortion, it has a profound effect on the outside environment. So if I can give an example, I will be in a session and I will be channeling and a person will break down and cry. Not because of what I said, but because what was felt by the person because of the energy that I am quote unquote channeling. Okay. The other thing I want to say is that although truth and source is very gentle but powerful, it can also feel disarming and it can also create discomfort in people. Why? Because when higher frequency is met with a distortion, it actually amplifies this distortion. So I gave an example in my video last week that someone has posted on one of my older videos where I was channeling Yeshua. and the person said that I'm being deceived, that I am working with whatever fallen angels and I am deceiving people, but the person commenting was the one that was chosen, and she's the bride of Jesus Christ, and she's the one that's being saved, and that automatically makes me somehow wrong. It wasn't that what I was channeling was wrong. It was that what I was channeling was met with someone's distortion, and the person got triggered. But in and of itself, source is non-judgmental. It simply is unconditionally loving. Also, channeling source can reveal certain truths that we don't want to look at for whatever reason, because they're uncomfortable, because they're inconvenient, because they're bad, whatever it may be. So the more clearly we channel source, the more opportunity we have to expand our consciousness, because source is a very expanded state, if I can use that analogy. So channeling source allows us to become much more expanded human beings. And what does it mean to be much more expanded human beings? To simply put, to live life without our distortions, or as least amount of distortions as possible. So how do you recognize your distortions? Well, Joanna, how do I recognize my distortion? Great question. Thank you for asking. First and foremost, you will feel distortion in your body. It's often you can recognize a distortion through your ego. So for example, when I realized that I was able to channel source, and then it was actually validated to me through a completely third party that had knew nothing about me, I was met with this amplification of my truth, my distortions, that I'm not worthy. Okay? And that distortion was important for me to see, because if I didn't see that distortion, then it would cloud or filter what I was channeling. So knowing your distortions or your shadows is, I would say, it's critical in this process. But how do you recognize your distortions? Receiving messages that perfectly match what you're hoping for. So if you're channeling source and you're receiving everything that you want, you are likely channeling through your ego. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's something to keep an eye on, okay? When you channel and makes you feel superior, chosen, or more important, which I have seen many channelers do that, that is a distortion, because no one else is more special than the other person, and anyone can channel, and anyone can and does channel source. So if someone says, if channeling makes you feel superior or chosen or somehow more important, you are very likely channeling through your distortions. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that your channeling is not as pure as it could be. Okay? Also, a message that carries urgency, fear, or gripping emotional spike, that is very likely being filtered through your distortions. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's something to keep an eye on. Source has no agenda. If you get triggered, that's your ego stepping forward. Recognize the trigger, notice what the trigger is, notice what the story is, and recognize that it is your distortion being triggered. Again, the more you can recognize and become aware of your distortion, the more you can keep your distortion at bay while channeling source. Thank you for reminding me. So I just heard something. Sometimes This is a separate subject, but I feel like it wants to come through. Also, if someone you see is channeling source and that makes you feel inferior, that's your distortion. So you might want to ask yourself, do I feel inferior because this person says they're channeling source or angel, whatever it is, and I don't? And I don't because blah, 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 blah. Again, anyone can and does channel source each and every day. Without source within you, you wouldn't exist. Okay? Anything that you channel that avoids challenging your beliefs or blind spots. If whatever you're channeling says, yes, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. Again, source doesn't care if you're right or wrong. Source simply is. But if you're channeling something that helps you avoid or challenge your belief systems, then you are likely channeling through your ego and through your distortions. Okay? There's a check that you can do for yourself. Does what I'm channeling land with peace and coherence in the body, or does it land with fear? If it lands with fear, then likely your distortion is coming online. And that's because source knows no fear. And source can present to you information in such a way that, in my personal experience, the most challenging and difficult and fearful situations, subjects can be presented in a way that is gentle, that is kind, but it's also truth at the same time. And it, rather than landing abruptly, it lands softly. Source doesn't demand anything of you. If you're channeling something or someone that demands something of you, you are likely not channeling source very clearly. It's not a fault of yours. It's not because it's bad. It's not because you're a bad person. It's just like most humans, you're filtering through your ego, and that's okay. But as long as you realize that you are filtering through your ego, as long as you have the recognition that you are filtering through your ego, you can recognize it. And because you can recognize it, you can become more clear channel. Okay? Shadow work and why it's so important if you want to consciously channel source, whether do it in the way I do it, or whether it's just you want to connect with source and ask source for answers, rather than asking some outside authority for answers. And that is not to say that someone may not have answers for you, but even if someone gives you an answer, how do you know that is the right answer for you? You have to check with yourself. Okay, so never give power or authority to someone who claims to channel truth and nothing but the truth. By all means, be open to it. By all means, look at it. By all means, try it on. But at the end of the day, always remember your truth, and the highest form of truth, lives within you. It's just a matter of accessing this higher form of truth. And the more we clear our shadows, the more, thank you, we integrate our shadows, the more, thank you, the more, the clearer we become. So they're asking me to say, when I said the more we clear our shadows, it doesn't mean we get rid of our shadows. It simply means we meet our shadows and we disconnect from our shadows as our identity. I'm being asked to give an example. Part of my identity was, and still is to some degree, I'm very open about these things because I'm not a perfect human being by any stretch of the imagination. Part of my distortion was that I was unworthy. And the more I was holding to that idea that I was unworthy, the less clear my channel was. Why? Because that part of me, that distortion of me, was trying to manipulate information in order to serve it in a way that people would like. Sometimes hearing truth is met with, yeah, and that's because sometimes truth is inconvenient. Doesn't mean that it's bad. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. And sometimes truth is inconvenient. But again, the clearer channel you are, the more truth you can handle in a way that's not going to uproot your identity. In other words, this is not about getting rid of your identity. You need your identity in this physical experience. It is releasing yourself from the identity, at least temporarily, so that you can channel more clearly. Okay? So, what are shadows? Shadows are past aspects of us that we disown, deny, or judge. Okay? Do you have some of those? Of course you do, because you're a human being. And you know what? That's totally okay. Shadows are not bad. Shadows are concepts that were developed generally early in life. And generally speaking, they're there to protect us. So your shadow is always there trying to protect you from something. And I always say, don't look at shadow as something bad. Don't look at shadow as something to get rid of. Look at it in terms of your relationship with your shadow, because you are in a relationship with your shadow. And if your shadow is your driver and you're the passenger, then your shadow is in control of your life. Shadow is also based in fear. So if you identify with your shadow, you will be identifying with the fearful aspect of you, and you will be living your life through fearful lenses, and you will see life and experience life through fearful lenses. Does that mean that we should get rid of all fear? Absolutely not. Fear is a necessary part of this human life. Fear protects us from dying prematurely. So fear is a very important part of who we are. It is, I always say, if you're being chased by a lion, I want you to be fearful, because that's going to make you run and it's going to help you escape and hopefully save your life. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about fears like, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not capable enough. I will never amount to anything. Those are all limiting aspects, and those limitations affect everything we see, everything we do, and therefore everything we experience. So the more we identify with our shadows, the more limited experiences we will create. And yes, I'm saying the word create. Why? Because we create life as we see it. We co-create life with the universe, yes, but we are very powerful creators. Now, I want to stress this point. Does that mean that you have created everything in your life? Well, from a higher perspective, yes, but, and I want to be very careful here. If you have someone who's struggling with something and you say to them, well, you've created this, that's weaponizing truth. And that's not helpful. Because of course, a person has not consciously created a terrible situation. Yes, they may have contributed to their experience because of their unconscious awareness, yes. But to say to somebody who's struggling, oh, you have created this, not helpful, not advisable, and not congruent with the highest truth, which is love. So truth can be weaponized, and it has been in many cases. I would not advise for it because, well, we want less weapons, not more weapons. Just my humble opinion. Okay. Shadows also contain wounds, unconscious patterns, and fear-based projections. Again, when we are fear-based, we will see life through our fear-based lenses. If someone lives in fear all the time, they're going to feel fearful each and every day. They're going to experience a lot of anxiety. They're going to experience a lot of turmoil inside of themselves. And that's because inside of them, they don't feel safe. So shadows, when we identify with our shadows, they don't make us feel safe. Because again, shadows are based in fear, and fear is the opposite of safety. An acknowledged shadow will filter source messages. So we talked about this before. If you are not aware of your shadows, if you are not aware of your distortions, you are undoubtedly channel source through these distortions. Not because you're a bad person, not because you're doing something wrong, but because these shadows are unacknowledged and therefore unconscious. And if you are unconscious of your own shadow, then we could say you can't really integrate your shadow because you're not even aware of it. So knowing your shadows is also knowing your truth, because each shadow contains a certain truth within it. If one of your shadows is, I'm never going to be loved, because you have experienced not feeling loved, that becomes your truth. And if you have experienced not feeling loved and that becomes your truth, then you will look at life from that perspective. I will never be loved. And as long as you hold on to truth, your life will always bring you equivalent experiences. Not because you're a bad person, not because you've done something wrong, but because you're holding onto an energetic pattern within your beingness that has to be met with your experience. That is how we create life. Again, that does not mean that if someone is in a really bad situation that they have created it. On an unconscious level, from a higher perspective, yes, but we have to be very mindful how we present information. For example, if I'm dealing with a client and I'm being shown very clearly where is the origin of their illness, and it is less structural and biological and more emotionally based, then that means that their emotional dissonance has created an influx of flow energy that ultimately expresses itself as some form of illness. Just because I see it, I would never, in my wildest dream, say to this person, well, you have created this. That's not helpful. If someone is not conscious of their creation, then we can't really say, well, you've created this, because first and foremost, it's mean, it's not helpful. And if they're not conscious of their creation, then how can they have created it, right? So yes, there is a component of one's creation from an unconscious perspective that we all co-create our reality. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but it doesn't mean we're doing it consciously. That's why knowing your shadows and knowing your distortions allows you to become much more conscious creator. Okay. Another example. If you know or have been someone who have felt very disempowered in your life, like I have, it is very likely that you would hold a lot of emotions and unprocessed fear and unprocessed pain in your solar plexus. So you will be holding yourself back because of your belief system, what you believe about yourself. And in my experience, that holding onto that belief system, holding onto those emotions, has created a lot of physical elements in my digestive system. So I have a very sensitive digestive system, and I was in pain most of my life when it came to my digestive system. It has now gotten better, much better, since I've cleared a lot of my distortions. But, I could see how there's a part of me that has created my discomfort in my digestive system, but I didn't consciously do it. So I don't blame myself for it, but I recognize that holding on to distortions affects and limits how I see myself, and therefore how I express myself and how I limit my own power. And if I limit my own power, I'm holding all that energy in the body, and the energy is creative. It has to move. So it starts to create problems in a physical vessel. But I would never say to somebody, oh, you have created your own problems in your physical body. That is not helpful. And I'm hearing the words a spiritual bypass. It's also a way of spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing? Is that a spiritual bypass? It's a form of spiritual bypass. Okay, I'll take that. Shadow work is essential. Integration removes the filter. So again, we're talking about channeling through as least amount of distorted lenses, filters as possible. How to work with shadow and distortion? Well, first and foremost, notice any emotional reactions as shadow signals. Triggers. One of the best ways to recognize your shadow is through your triggers. Triggers are uncomfortable. They're often very reactionary, or we are reactionary to our triggers. And when I'm triggered, it's like this of energy. I can feel it. Most people that I've worked with don't stop long enough to feel it and to tune into what it is that they're feeling, because there's a story that's being triggered. Most people just react. Okay? So this is one way of noticing your triggers. When you do notice the trigger, when you notice the signal, name it without judgment. Name it without judgment. The more you remove judgments, the less resisting you will become to working with your shadows. Shadows are not good. Shadows are not bad. Shadows simply are. It's part of our experience. Once you feel your trigger, feel it fully without story. Now, this is a difficult one because when we triggered, we have all these stories running out, and there's running in our minds, and it's all the important things we need to understand. When you just feel your trigger without a story, you allow the trigger, which is energy in motion, to be present, to be fully present, to be witnessed, and to be moved through your body. So take a deep breath. Notice your trigger. Notice where it's coming from within your body, and just ask this trigger, what is this trigger telling me? And you will likely very quickly realize, hear, or perceive what is your story. Okay? Don't get stuck in the story. Just allow yourself to be present with the story without overanalyzing it, without trying to make it right, without trying to make it wrong, without trying to fix it. Just be present with it. Ask the trigger what is protecting. When you get triggered, ask it, what are you protecting me from? It might be protecting you from feeling inadequate. It might be protecting you from feeling judged. It might be protecting you from not being safe. It might be protecting you from not being seen. There are so many different things. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment. But the more you are aware of your story, the more conscious you are of this yak, yak, yak story, the more you can perceive the story as part of you, but not you. So you stop identifying with the story. And when you stop identifying with the story, you realize you're not the story, number one. But number two, if you're holding on to one story, then you can create a different story, but you have to be conscious. Bring your shadow into light with compassion. Why is this important? Because the one thing I've learned over the 25 years of working with shadows, all the shadow wants is to be loved. Not by somebody else, by you. That's right. Your shadow just wants to be loved by you. Your shadows just wants to be accepted by you. Now, this is a difficult concept for some people, because if you have a shadow, well, I don't want to accept my shadow. Here's the thing. When you stop rejecting your shadow, you stop resisting your shadow. When you stop resisting your shadow actually softens. Your shadow relax. Your shadow says something along the lines, it is okay for me to be seen. It is safe for me to be seen. So, your shadow just wants to be loved by you. And the moment you allow yourself to see that is the moment of your liberation. Why? Well, for one thing, love heals. When you love somebody, you embrace them. You don't reject them. And shadows are the result of rejection, rejecting aspects of ourselves. The more we reject ourselves, the less whole we feel on the inside. I talk about this all the time. And when we feel not whole, we try to go to the outside environment to fill us with things so that we feel whole. There is no thing out there in the world to make you feel whole. Why? Because you are whole already. You're already whole. You may not feel that. That's because of your distortions and your experiences. But just because you feel something doesn't mean you are that. I say it in a funny way. Just because you feel like shit doesn't make you a pile of poop, right? Okay. With each integration of your shadow, i.e., accepting your shadow versus disowning your shadow, and here's again, they're asking me to share. If you have a shadow that's unworthy, for example, okay, like I do, accepting my unworthiness does not mean that I'm accepting being unworthy. What it does mean is that I am accepting the part of me that I have vilified, that I have rejected, that I have disowned. And I bring it back to myself and I show it love. I show it compassion. I show it inclusivity. And because I do that, the shadow softens. And when it softens, it relaxes. And when it relaxes, it becomes safe. And therefore, when it's safe, it no longer feels the need to control everything. Because remember, control is generally tied to safety. Steps to channel source clearly. Let's talk about this. Preparing your vessel, your body. Hydrating, breathing, settling. If you are outside of your body all the time because it doesn't feel safe being in your body, you're not going to be a clear channel because you're going to be in your head. And that is wonderful. It perceives things, but it does perceive things with limitations because your head is tied to your ego, and ego is limited in its nature. On the other hand, when you channel through your body knows truth. You don't know truth in your mind, you feel truth in your body. So, making sure that you are taking good care of your body is, I would say, is the number one requirement. It's taking care of your mind, but it's equally as important to taking care of your body. Set the field. Intend to receive highest truth without distortion. That is always, always, always my intention. And I try to do my best. I say try because I'm still working on it. I'm still human. But I try to do my best. But my intention is always very, very clear. Whatever wants to come through me, always with love, grace, compassion, and love and healing, only with the purpose of what is for the highest good of all. That is always my intention. Okay? Empty before filling. In other words, drop agenda, hope, or fear. If you're channeling with the hope of receiving certain information, you are too much attached to the outcome. An outcome is based on what your ego wants. So you're going to be filtering through your ego. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you will not be able to channel as clearly as you can, as possible. Okay? So dropping agenda, dropping hope, dropping fear, relaxing your body, relaxing your mind, and be unattached to the outcome. I'll give you an example. For the longest time when I was working with clients, I wanted a certain outcome for my clients. And that was very much driven by my ego, because my ego wanted to make sure that I was doing good work. But sometimes the client would not react or be in a way I wanted it for them. And I had this big realization, and I believe it was actually told to me, is that the more I attach myself to the outcome, the less clear I will be in my channeling. So it doesn't mean that I want what's best for my client. Of course I do. Absolutely. I want you to be empowered. But if I put my own agenda on you, then I cannot be effectively the clearest channel possible. So I wish for my client to have the best experience, but how they perceive it, what they do with the information, how they go about it, whether they even choose to acknowledge what's being said or not, that's entirely up to them. So I think dropping agenda is a really, really big one. Receive in multiple senses: words, images, sensation, known. So like I described to you in the beginning, I perceive flow in various different ways. Sometimes it's words, as you hear me talking to source. Sometimes it's feelings. Sometimes it's sound. Sometimes it's just breath. Sometimes I hear music, and that's supposed to tell me something. So perceiving in various different ways. Sometimes it's just a knowing. Write, speak before analyzing. This is a huge one. And this took me a really long time to let go of, because I wanted to understand everything that I was channeling through. But the reality is, if I'm understanding everything I'm channeling through, then that means I'm not really receiving any new information, even though there's nothing new, because at the end of the day, truth is known within us. But if I'm needing to understand everything that comes through, then I'm putting my ego's filters. Again, that does not help me be in the clearest channel. So yes, sometimes I will channel information, I will go, I'm not sure if that's true or not. That's when I know it's not my ego. That's when I know that I'm being the clearest channel possible, okay? Discern, this is a big one. Check for peace and coherence in the body. The more clearly you channel, the more you will feel at peace with what you are channeling. When I channel information, when I channel source, it is never, ever with fear. The moment fear creeps in, I have to check myself and I have to ask, is this interference? Because I know source knows no fear. So is it interference, or is it my ego seeping through? More often than not, whatever it is that I'm channeling is triggering my fear buttons. So I have to be very mindful, and I have to pause, and I have to check with myself what's going on. So that's all mindfulness. That's all being mindful of your shadows and your triggers. So being discerning, checking for peace and coherence in your body is very important. If you are channeling something that makes you feel fearful, then it's worthwhile for you to pause and ask yourself this question: is this pure channel coming through me? Is this some form of interference? Or is this my fear seeping through? And then you have to be very discerning. Live the message. Alignment is in the proof. When I channel higher frequency, I feel so aligned. When I stop channeling, I go back to my regular day. But at the end of the day, what I channel is what I feel personally is very freeing and very liberating. But the only way I can feel liberated in my own life is if I practice what comes through me. Source is not going to make me do things this way or that way. It'll simply mirror back to me what's possible. And that's because, remember, Source has no agenda. So when it shows me what's possible, I then need to make a choice to integrate that into my life, or, be the message, and go back to, living my life through my distorted lenses. Here's what I will say. Someone who doesn't live or practice the truth they channel, I would personally not have high confidence in, because it's telling me that they don't practice what they preach. And this is not a judgment. I've done it. I'll be the first one to tell you. But if someone channels certain frequency, certain higher truth, certain higher consciousness, but they don't practice it, it's either they don't believe what they channel, which, if they don't believe what they channel, well, that's an interesting conversation. Joanna, do I believe in what I channel? Yes. And here's why I believe it. Because it resonates in my body. It's not a thought I have, oh, I believe, yeah. It's not a blind faith. It's not like I'm told something and automatically I assume, yeah, that's true. It resonates in my body. It's a resonance. It's frequency-based. Okay? So live the message. Alignment is proof. The more you live according to what you channel, first and foremost, the more you will be at peace, the more you will feel liberated, the less you will feel anxious, the more empowered you will feel, and the more you will feel in charge of your life. Does that mean that you're going to control your life? No. There's very few things that we can actually control, but you will feel much more in charge of your life with many, many options and choices than you previously thought was possible. Okay? So, anyone could channel Source. Everyone does. But speaking and channeling Source as far as information, guidance, wisdom, your clarity must be to focus. What does that mean? In order for you to be the clearest channel possible, you have to have clarity of yourself. You have to see yourself very clearly. Do I see myself very, very clearly? There is always layers, and they keep coming up over and over again, but I do my best to be as clear as possible. How? By acknowledging my shadows, by noticing my distortions, by noticing my triggers, and most importantly, practicing what I preach. And I don't preach, I just use that word because it's a statement everybody understands. But let me put it this way. I do my best to practice what I preach. Sometimes I fail. It's like, oh, shit, here we go again. My ego took over. I dust myself up. I would get up and I do it again. I'm not perfect. And this isn't about perfection anyway. Universe is not asking us to be perfect. The universe is simply saying, be more aligned, be more in tune with higher power, be more in tune with your higher power, be more at peace with your source, be more at peace with yourself. Because when you're more at peace with yourself, you are less in inner conflict. And that itself creates a lot more peace. Clarity comes from meeting distortions and integrating shadows. We talked about that. This is what I do. This is essentially the work that I do. I help people become aware of their distortions, not to go, look, this is your distortion. No, this is not how it works. I mirror to people back what's within them, but perhaps it's under a layer of other things, so they're not able to see it. I don't tell people what the distortions are. I share with them information in a way that it comes through so that they go, oh, I didn't see it. So they're not seeing it because I tell them to see it. They see it because there is a recognition that's happening, okay? Channeling is about honesty, embodiment, and self-seeing. This is what I just said. Here's the one thing I will share with you, and if there's anything that I could share with you, it probably would be this. One of the best way that I know how to become the clearest channel possible, and again, I'm not perfect. I will never say that, and I never did say it. I do my best, but the best way that I can personally share with you how I try to be the clearest channel is to be brutally honest with myself. And that's not easy. That's hard. Because it means I have to face my own shadows. I have to, I don't have to, but I want to. I have to integrate my shadows. And I do that because I no longer want to be controlled by my shadows. And the less I am controlled by my shadows, the more I am in observation of my shadows, which means when I observe my shadows and I observe my shadow kicking in, I'm so conscious of it that I can take a deep breath and realign myself. On the other hand, if you're not conscious of your shadow is going to seep in without you even knowing it, and you're just going to keep on going, not even realizing that your shadow has a hold of you. You don't want your shadow to be your boss. And very frequently, this is what happens with humans because many humans are not aware of their shadows. Some are aware of their shadows, but they choose to ignore their shadows. Why? Because acknowledging your shadows is looking at yourself. And because we are so critical of ourselves and because we hold so much judgment, it's uncomfortable. Here's the thing. If you were to look at your shadow, without judgment, I guarantee you that facing your shadow would be so much easier. In fact, it is. I know because I've done it. I keep doing it. And that's what I do with clients. So working with your shadow can feel very disorienting, can feel very disarming. It is extremely liberating, but it requires an effort. It requires awareness, and it requires being honest with yourself. Example, if you're out on the street and all of a sudden you judge someone, notice the judgment. Don't beat yourself up. Just notice it. Oh, okay, I just judged somebody. Where is that coming from? Where is this judgment coming from? Likely you're judging someone because whatever it is you're judging within them, you are in dissonance within yourself. If you're judging someone, it's because whatever that someone represents to you is in you and you're judging it. Okay? Clear messages carry a felt frequency of truth. This is true. It's true for me from my experience. When I'm very, very clear as possible, there's a certain frequency that flows through me. And again, everybody can do it. I'm not special. I am emphatically saying I'm not special. But when I'm very clear, there's a certain resonance that flows through me that's almost palatable. And it has a very powerful effect on the field and on another person, a very positive effect. Because remember, higher consciousness is unconditional love at the end of the day. It doesn't judge. It doesn't condemn. It doesn't vilify. It doesn't demand. Source simply is unconditional. And when you're channeling clearly, you help other people see themselves In a way, how do I say it? When you are a clear channel, you can help someone see themselves and their distortions through the eyes of love rather than through the eyes of condemnation. And when someone is seen through the eyes of love, they feel safe to be seen. They feel safe to see themselves. And when we feel safe to see ourselves, this is when integration happens, because we're no longer fearing who we are. What else do I have for you? I'm just going to go through these energetic markers of a clear channel, even though I've already said it. Coherence in the body. You know when you're channeling clearly where you are, when you feel a lot of coherence in the body. Energy feels steady, balanced, and congruent with words. You likely speak fluidly without talking very fast. Because if you start talking very fast, likely that's your ego stepping forward. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But in my personal experience, the clearer the channel, the more fluid the information flows, and the more compassionate it is, the more stable and solid it feels in the body. Listeners feel a natural settling, even when messages are confronting. And yes, truth can sometimes feel disarming, but when it comes with certain level of purity, it's never to confront for the sake of confronting. It's to simply name a distortion. Okay, and sometimes seeing distortions in ourselves, well, can feel a little bit unsettling. Okay. There's no major split between transmission and embodiment. You feel at one with the frequency. You feel at one with the frequency. You feel like right now I feel one with the flow. I just feel it's just flowing through me. I still can feel my ego, but it's kind of sort of on the side. There is a natural net neutrality in the delivery. Messages carry neither inflation nor diminishment, and most certainly they don't carry fear. Okay, if somebody's channeling and there is a lot of fear that's being channeled through, it's likely channeled through incoherence. The tone is grounded. There's no selling, no performing, no dramatizing. Messages can stand without convincing or defending. And I always say, and I said at the beginning of every single video, I think I must have said it in this one. If I didn't, I'm going to say it. I do not want you to accept anything that comes out of my mouth as the truth. I want you to be on authority. What I would wish for is for you to be open and notice how it lands in your body. Let your body tell you, because your body knows truth. You register truth in the body, okay? And most importantly, channeling higher frequency has a calming effect on your nervous system. So if you feel calm when you listen to somebody versus when you feel agitated, that's something you might want to look into. There is an absolute absence of urgent manipulation. Messages may call to action, but without fear or panic. Okay, remember, source has no agenda. The listener has a space to feel into their own truth without rush. Again, I will never tell you that what I channel is the truth and the holy truth and nothing but the truth. Absolutely not. It is a certain perspective. It is a higher level perspective from my experience. And I have put this perspective into practice. And because of it, I have been able to turn my life around. It's not that source turned life around for me. I practiced what I channel, essentially. Live from love. Willingness to be wrong. Open to refinement and correction over time. No attachment to being the sole authority. Source is the authority. So this is what I just mentioned. So I don't claim that what I channel is the absolute truth, because I know there is different types of truths out there. What I channel is the level of truth that I am ready to handle. But it's still higher truth than the one that I'm used to with respect to my ego. Okay, so being open to refinement, and being willing to grow is a huge hallmark of someone who is a clear channel. Acknowledges distortion and meets them. So like I was talking to you before, I notice my distortion creeping in, and there's a tendency for my distortion to want to take control because I have been killed and vilified for what I do in other lifetimes. And I very much am aware of it. I am openly sharing this with you. I have no problems with sharing this with you because it's what makes me a human being. My distortion isn't bad or good. It doesn't make me bad or good. It doesn't make someone who has distortions less than me. It means we're human beings. And that's perfectly okay because Source doesn't ask for perfection. In fact, you already are perfect in your own beautiful, unique, screwed up way. Don't bypass discomfort by claiming all messages are pure truth. So I already talked about that. Okay. Don't bypass discomfort by claiming all messages are pure truth. Pause to check and clear before presenting a message. So I'm asking myself, how do I do that? I let it flow through me and I register it in my body. If I feel there's a flow with no resistance, I move through it. So it doesn't mean that I am questioning what I am receiving. I am being mindful how it registers in my body. So the moment something would come in and I would feel fear, I would have to stop and I would have to recenter myself. And first and foremost, ask myself the question, what's coming through? What am I allowing through? Or is it my distortion coming online? Okay. The underlying field holds space and safety, even with intense content. That means that a channel can channel Source, and it may be information that is not comfortable, but at the same time, it's presented in a way that feels loving, caring, compassionate, without agenda, without blame, and without judgment. Okay? Message lands in the body. So I talked about this. Listeners feel the truth physically, either through chills, warmth, or opening. Resonance goes beyond agree or disagree. It is felt as alignment. So if you're listening to something like this, always check with your body. How does it land in your body? Now, what's interesting thing is that channeling truth or higher source doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be met with an agreement. And that's because, like I explained earlier, sometimes channeling higher truth can threaten one's ego. And when that happens, ego tries to protect itself and tries to blame either the message or the messenger. But just because the message isn't received in a certain way, it doesn't mean the message is wrong or it's not important or it's not somehow, so it's not important. Just like I was saying earlier, I was met with someone who said that I channel some lower evolved beings and that I'm delusional and I'm basically unsafe. And the person who was chosen by Jesus as his wife was the one that was correct. Okay? There's no compulsion to prove. There's no trying to convince skeptics or showcase gifts for validation. I always say, and I'm not making myself as an example because I've arrived. I'm just screwed up as everybody else. The only little difference maybe it's a big difference, is that I am constantly working on being conscious of how screwed up I am so that that doesn't control my life and ultimately what I channel. Okay? Messages hold up in hindsight, still feel true months or years later. In fact, there's been times where I channeled written years ago, and at the time of the transmission, I read it and made no sense. And then only years later, I would come across the channeled writing, I would read it, and I would go, did I just write that? Because at the time where I was receiving the information, I wasn't as harmonized or in coherence with that information. So it's like that information wasn't landing in my body, and because I was still in a lot of distortion. But years later, now that I've cleared a lot of the distortions, I still have plenty, the message just lands true. So sometimes that can happen. You might be channeling information that make no sense to you at the time of channeling, but ultimately at the end of the day or sometime later, you read and you go, wow, that's quite profound. Last but not least, channeling is a relationship. It's not a tool to get things. Okay? So if you are wanting to channel for yourself and you want Source to tell you what to do, that's not going to happen because you are essentially giving your authority away. Source doesn't want that for you. Source is not your authority. Source gave you authority over yourself. As much time is spent listening and embodying as delivering. So not only do you channel, but you listen, you quiet your mind, and you embody what you channel. If you channel about love, if you channel about oneness, if you channel about releasing judgments, then you kind of sort of have to practice it. And I think that's all I have for you. I forgot to mention my Peru retreat coming up in early November. I'm so excited about it. If you are interested in plant ceremony retreat in the Sacred Valley, you can drop me a line. My email is down below, and I can send you information very happily. And let me know in your comments how this connects with you, and I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care of yourself. Thank you so much for being here, and see you soon. Bye-bye.